Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I'm just sitting here drinking my morning coffee, getting ready to get my day started, do some squatting, because I do squat every day, which kind of brings us to the interesting topic of the law of accommodation. I've had a lot of questions in the last few weeks, even with my own training. Hey, what about the law of accommodation? How are you going to get around that? How are you getting around that? That's a good question, because it's something I've talked about many years ago. I have talked about the law of accommodation off and on for 5 or 6 years on YouTube. And other YouTubers are starting to talk about it a little bit. But here's the thing, guys. People are blowing this out of proportion. The law of accommodation and bypassing it isn't rocket surgery. Yeah, I just made that term up. It's not rocket surgery. Normally, with the law of accommodation, the whole idea is that after about 3 weeks, because of repeated stimulus of the exact same training response, you stop adapting. In other words, you stop gaining muscle and stop gaining strength from the same thing, and you have to change something, and you're subject to stagnation. Now, the majority of you out there listening, you're novices. You don't need to worry about this stuff. You need to go ahead and build your base. The law of accommodation for a novice is removed by adding weight to the bar. Literally, if you add 2.5 or 5 pounds to each lift at least once every 3 weeks, as a novice, you will completely bypass the law of accommodation. Completely, it will not apply to you because you change the stimulus. You're not going to stagnate. If you stagnate at a 250 squat for 3 or 4 or 5 reps and a 315 deadlift for 5 reps as a novice, you are starving yourself. That is the only possible explanation. You are either starving yourself or you're not sleeping. Okay, that's what's going on. You need to quit trying to maintain your razor sharp abs while weighing 135 pounds, and you should probably get yourself up to 145 pounds. All right, that's simple. For everyone else, this for more advanced lifters, intermediate and advanced lifters, this becomes a bigger problem because they can't just add weight every time, meaning there's no guarantee that they're going to be able to add weight to the bar at least once every 3 weeks. Now, with a novice, you need to be doing it every time you go to the gym. And like I tell people, novice lifters, if you're on a good linear progression program, most of you should be able to bench 225 for reps, squat 315 for reps, deadlift 405 for reps, probably before you see any major stalls, right? You should be able to do that inside of your first year. The only exceptions are going to be people who refuse to eat. Now, if you're fat, you already ate, so you're okay. You don't have to keep bulking. It's not necessary. Most morbidly obese people can hit those numbers while losing weight the entire year because they've already eaten the food and they already have the energy reserves and the recovery to tap into. The fuel is already there. For everyone else, it's a problem. So when I say it's easy, people say, well, what do you mean? You don't change your exercises really. You're doing the same primary lifts and we're not seeing any stop in progress. What's going on? In fact, I'm actually losing weight. Perfect example of what's going on. What have we seen me do over the last 6 weeks? When I first started filming, I had just finished up having a daily minimum of 425 on my squat again, right? Squatting 425 every day. I think I did like one workout with 425 still on the camera, but that first week I went to 435 really, but now I'm up to 470. That's what I squat. It looks just as light. We've seen no slowing of progress. That is basically in 6 weeks, I've put 45 pounds on the bar for what I squat every single day, and I don't predict any stalling till I reach 500. So I'll be squatting 500 every day this summer, and then I'll progress beyond that. But no one has seen me change anything in my squat routine. So for a lot of people who don't understand the law of accommodation, that doesn't make sense. And I would say, well, no, I had to deal with it at first because I didn't go to Bulgaria until I could squat 405 again. You guys got to remember, my squat, I didn't squat for 2 years. I dropped down to a 315 squat after not squatting for 2 years. I had to build it up to 405. That's when I switched to this style of training. And when I started to this style of training, I was doing 405 every day. That was where I started. It stalled a little bit early on. It started feeling heavy. So what did I do? I rotated in another exercise 3 days a week. I continued to squat to a daily training max 3 days a week with a back squat. I switched in and did a front squat, alternated every other day. That pushed me past my plateau and it moved me up to a 425 daily. And from that point forward, I haven't changed anything in my squat routine, and I don't intend to. So what have I done different? I've changed accessories. That's what people need to remember. You can bypass the law of accommodation. If you don't want to run 3-week blocks of periodization, and let's say you want to run the same basic rep and set pattern on your primary lifts, if it's a viable pattern, something like my case, squatting to a daily minimum. Let's say you want to do that every day, or you want to do 5x5 3 times a week. I don't know. There's a lot of viable things you could do. How do you keep progressing? Well, you don't have to change the main lifts. If you don't want to run them in 3-week blocks like normal classic periodization does to bypass this, you can change your accessories. You can change your accessories. Or you can increase or decrease volume with back off work. So, for example, what did I do? A few weeks ago, for a couple weeks, I rotated in trap bar deadlifts. That has carryover to your squat. And because I did it as an accessory, I probably gained a little bit of muscle, extra growth stimulation of my hamstrings, my glutes, my lower back, all that. All these muscles you need to help stabilize your squat. Because we know the hamstrings aren't an amazing primary mover on the squat. Now, the low bar, they do contribute. They will grow from it. But by strengthening some of those, it reinforced everything again that I needed to get stronger on my squat. It allowed my quads to get stronger again because I could overload a little more, I could move a little more weight, and I continued to progress, and I cut them back out, and I'm still progressing. In other words, you can add an accessory in for 3 weeks. In fact, that's what I would tell people. You can rotate your accessories every 3 weeks. That will take you through the law of accommodation. And if they're big exercises, what you need to understand, big exercises as accessories stimulate the whole body. All right, you can bypass the law of accommodation by changing one big movement as an accessory every 3 weeks. That is actually more than enough for even the most advanced lifters, barring elite level ultra athletes, meaning if you don't squat 600 pounds, we're not talking about you. A 500-pound squat is not an ultra elite lifter, okay? So for everybody else, something as simple as changing a big accessory movement that affects the entire body, or at least half of it, is enough to get through a law of accommodation. That's all you have to do. Same thing, my chin-ups. What did I do? I actually haven't done them in a week now. I haven't done any curls for over a week. I added in some compound movement type cheat curls. My chin-ups kept progressing. Now I've cut it back out. Minor adjustments in frequency, same thing. You know, again, my overhead pressing has gotten better. I've lost weight, but now I've gone from taking my overhead press max, it was a grinding max, to something I do every day with less of a grind. Because again, I increased the frequency of it. And your big movements can carry over to each other. Bench press and overhead press feed each other. So if you increase the frequency on one of those, that will bypass the law of accommodation. You've now put more workload in. Even if it's singles, you'll bypass the law of accommodation. And it can be sometimes something as simple as if you stall too much, sometimes you can decrease volume to allow better recovery and more focus on your primary lifts. You can add volume on a main lift, like let's say someone who's squatting to a max or training max, a daily minimum, 6-7 days a week. They start to stall. You can take 1 day a week, 1 day, maybe 2 days, and add a back off double or triple, and that will give you a new training response. All right, it really is that simple. In other words, let's say you're stuck at a 400 squat every day. You could come in on Monday and Friday and put 300 pounds on the bar afterwards and hit 3 reps with it. And it will start pushing you forward. You will start adapting again. All right, it really and truly is that simple. Your bench press stalls or any other lift, even a minor variation in the main lift, if you're stalled on your bench press, something as simple as changing your grip by 1 inch, you now have a slightly different training response. You get a novel training response. You've confused the muscles by changing your grip by 1 inch. Do that for 3 weeks and then go back to your other, and you might start progressing again. Do a longer pause on the bench. Let's say you've been doing a half-second pause. Drop down to a 2-second pause. Pause for 2 full seconds. Spend 3 weeks building up your 2-second pause, and then your half-second pause will again start to creep back up again, because you will get a novel training response. You'll get some structural adaptations. People make this out to be that they need to rotate exercises all the time, and that comes from West Side Barbell, and people need to understand the conjugate method was never intended for drug-free raw lifters, right? That's not who it's intended for. It's intended for drug-using equipped lifters, and it works very, very well for them. I mean, it will make them a champion if they follow that method for 5 years straight, follow it perfectly. They'll be a champion in that particular sport. If they blast a bunch of drugs and they learn to use their equipment and they follow that method, they will be kicking butt in 5 years. But for everyone else, it's going to be a slow journey because you're detrained all the time. It's not going to work. So the law of accommodation, kind of people don't understand that it really, the minor changes help. Something as simple as changing your technique on a lift for 3 weeks, adjusting your accessory work for 3 weeks, adding a little bit of volume, reducing a little bit of volume, a slight bump in frequency, any of that. So in other words, if you're overhead pressing 5 days a week and you go to 6 and do that one extra heavy single 6 days a week instead of 5, guess what? You now have a different training response. You will help bypass it. Basically, the idea behind the law of accommodation is that if you do the exact same reps and sets and form and grip and everything on all your lifts without changing anything, not a single thing for 3 weeks, you will probably stall, and you might even see a tiny amount of regression on 1 or 2 of your lifts, right? That's basically what happens. But minor changes, particularly to big exercises, or adding a single accessory for your weak link on one of your big lifts, will cause you to bypass the entire thing and keep moving forward. Again, it's not as big of a deal as people think it is. You don't need to throw random things at it. You throw what you need to assess to be the appropriate thing to throw at it. But as long as you make a minor change in a major part of your program somewhere, things will change. And I mean, sometimes something as simple as, let's say you're doing something like I'm doing, and let's say you do a Bulgarian 4 days a week. You could throw in one movement and it's an accessory for another big movement, and if that movement gets stronger as a result of it, it'll carry through the entire body. In other words, the chin up. Let's say your biceps, so use as a perfect example, biceps are weak link in my chin up. I threw in some curls. Some cheap curls is a compound movement, because compound movements carry over better to strength, even for small muscles. Your chin up then goes up slightly. Well, your entire back will get stronger, because if you can now move more weight on the chin up, your chin up goes up by 10 pounds. Your back will get greater stimulation. The stronger lats and stronger traps and all of that you develop from that will carry over slightly to your squat and your deadlift. And then you'll see a larger systematic response from changing that one variable. It may not be major. We're never going to see big boosts in performance for advanced lifters, but it's enough to push you past a plateau. And it doesn't need to be random stuff. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.